Okay, now we're going to talk about how to go all the way around the world using points and miles by transferring your points to ANA. ANA is probably my favorite program in the world when it comes to booking flights because there's such great value for the miles. They do publish an award chart for their flights as well as flights on partners. It's a little bit complicated, so I've distilled it down to this. Again, Y is economy, PY is premium economy, C is business, and F is first. L is low season, R is regular season, and H is high season, like cherry blossom season or Christmas and things like that. And you can see all the different zones that you can go to from North America. To go to Japan in economy would be 50,000 plus taxes and fees, and in business would be 105,000. Here's an example of an itinerary that you could book from Chicago to Narita. You can see that there are taxes and fees of about $450 round trip. Here's another itinerary that I built to go to Beijing with a stop in Tokyo for a few days. And then instead of coming back from Beijing, going back from Vietnam. So you could just pay a few more miles and a few more taxes and fees, and you would be able to see Tokyo, China, and Vietnam using this. You would just have to find your own way between Beijing and Vietnam, but that's not a super expensive ticket. Here's the same itinerary in economy. For some reason, they did not have availability in economy on this route for these dates, so I had to switch the dates a little bit. One thing to know about ANA and United is it is very difficult to find business class tickets or first class tickets if you really want to fly first, more than 2 weeks out. Potentially you would find a few for only one person, but for two people, not very likely. And then if you want to fly like 8 people, probably not going to find that until like the day before or even the day of. Difficult to book these trips if you're not willing to like wait and kind of figure it out last minute. You can waitlist on ANA, but there's some risk to that. Basically, when the seat comes available, you're the first one to get it. They don't even like release it to the public. The only problem is if your trips don't come out of being waitlisted, then your whole itinerary will be refunded to you. So, and you won't be able to fly. Like, it's not like you fly economy if there's not a space in business, or you fly business if there's not a space in first. Like, you really don't want to do this unless you think, like, if I don't go on the trip, no big deal. You also cannot book within 96 hours of travel, which is relatively inconvenient because ANA does not release a lot of space too far ahead of time. So anyways, it is what it is, but just got to be flexible with this program to get the great value. When we talk about booking an around the world trip, which we will do in a second, you can book up to 12 segments on those trips. And let's say that you have a segment that you want, but it's not available except in economy. You can book it in economy, and then if the space becomes available in business more than 96 hours before departure, you can call ANA and say, hey, I saw that there's a seat available. Can you please upgrade me to that seat? And because you booked a business class fare, they will upgrade you to that for no additional miles. They may call you and ask for additional taxes and fees, but the points will be the same. Here's a list of zones that ANA uses for partner awards. That would be like United and their Star Alliance partners. Here's how much the tickets cost from North America in points, times the numbers by 1,000. So the first number is economy, the second number is business, and the last number is first. It's going to be very, very difficult to get any first class award space. You may be able to do it, but getting it round trip seems almost impossible. I'm sure it's been done before. Here's some examples of how you can use this to go to Europe, for example, flying on United or in Lufthansa or Swiss Air or in Austrian Airlines. You can fly for 55,000 in economy and 100,000 in business. Here's a flight on the top from LAX to Frankfurt. You can see it's 100,000 miles. The problem is that it's over $2,000 of taxes and fees because Lufthansa has high taxes and fees. If you book with Life Miles or if you book with United, those taxes and fees are not passed along, but the rates are much higher. So it would be better if you're going to book with ANA that you book a flight on United because United does not have high taxes and fees. You can see here that to book from San Francisco to Frankfurt, you could fly for 100,000 miles and you could actually return from London Heathrow, leveraging a open jaw. So you would just have to find your own way from Frankfurt to London, which should be relatively cheap, and you could see 2 countries for the price of 1. Okay, this is the epitome of points booking in my mind. This is the around the world chart from ANA. in both economy class and business class. They have one in first as well, but because it's relatively impossible to get space, I have decided not to include it in this video. Here are the rules of the around the world ticket. You must cross the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean once. The flight direction must be either east to west or west to east. If you're flying east to west, you will take a lot more time because the jet stream will be against you. If you're flying west to east, you'll be going a little bit faster. Depending on which class of service and how much you like flying, you may decide to go one way or another. You can stop up to 8 times for as long as you want in each different place, up to 3 times within Europe and 4 times within Japan. Your trip must be 10 days, so you can't just go around the world for a weekend trip and then come back. You can take a maximum of 12 flights, and you can also have 4 ground transport sectors. That basically means I'm going to fly into one country, find my own way to the next stop, and then I'll continue my itinerary from the next stop. And it won't count as one of your 12 segments. You're generally going to want to use your ground sectors when the cash price would be relatively low, so it's not necessarily worth it to use your points for that. Like I mentioned before, getting across the Pacific Ocean is going to be the most difficult part of this if you want to fly in a premium cabin. If you want to fly economy, you can get availability pretty much any time of year, as long as you're relatively flexible on the location. These are the different ways that you can get over. You can also look for flights to Seoul, Korea, or Taipei, Taiwan, or even Beijing, China, and see if you can find some availability, set the alerts, and then you can book your trip from there. But you're going to want to know that when that seat comes available, you've got the rest of the trip planned out, because this is going to be the hardest segment to find in business class. So I already showed you a flight from Chicago to Tokyo, and then another flight from Tokyo to Beijing. So these will be my first 2 segments of my around the world trip. So there's some time here to stop over and see Tokyo. It will also count as one of my 8 stopovers. For the sake of example, I'm just going to do a ground transport from Beijing to Hong Kong, find my own way from Beijing to Hong Kong, and then I will book my onward trip from Hong Kong to Bangkok, Thailand. You can see that they have business award space here on United.com. And usually, if it's available on United.com, ANA is also going to have the award space. It's not 100% of the time, but for the most part, if you can find it on United.com, it's available. Aeroplan is also generally available on ANA with the exception of Singapore Airlines. Aeroplan has access to Singapore award space that for some reason the rest of the Star Alliance partners do not. So if you find it on Aeroplan and it's a Singapore award flight, you may not be able to book it with ANA. But if you find it on United.com, generally you can book it on an ANA around the world trip. After hanging out in Bangkok for a little while, I added a trip to Singapore. And then from Singapore, to try to figure out where to go, I go to flightconnections.com, and then I just see all the different airports that I can fly to from Singapore. And it gives me kind of an idea like, oh, I could go to India, I could go to South Africa, I could go to Australia. Well, I can't really go to Australia because that would be going back the other way, but there's a lot of different options for places I could go. I could go direct to Europe if I could find space. That'd be kind of a hard seat to find probably, but the short hops on Singapore Airlines are usually available. So I've never been to the Maldives, and this is a fake itinerary, so I don't have plans to go to the Maldives, but I could actually book this flight from Singapore to the Maldives on Singapore Airlines, which is a great airline. I've never been there, so I'm looking at flights from the Maldives, and I see that on Star Alliance I can get to, it looks like Vienna, I can get to Istanbul, I can get to Mumbai or New Delhi. But when I looked up space on United, I didn't see a lot of availability to any of these destinations. So what I did is I just decided, okay, I'm going to just pay cash for this leg to get to Mumbai specifically. You could obviously go a lot of other places if you wanted to and then find your way back to kind of a Star Alliance hub. But for sake of example, I'm just booking a cash flight to Mumbai from the Maldives to get back into my sort of circuit. Most of the time when you're booking with Star Alliance, you're going to go from either from a hub or to a hub. If you're going between hubs, there'll be more space. So if you do this ticket enough, you're likely going to go through one of the major hubs in America, which is, you know, Chicago, Houston, Newark, San Francisco, LA, Denver. There's a few others. In Europe, you have Frankfurt, Austria, Zurich. In Asia, you have Tokyo, you have Singapore, you have Bangkok. In Africa, you have Addis Ababa, you have Johannesburg, you have Cairo. You're probably going to go through these airports at some point if you're booking the around the world trip because you'll either be coming from them or going to them. There's more partners than I listed there, but that gives you kind of an idea of like what you can expect. You can't like get a random flight from a small airport to a small airport. You'd have to go through one of the hubs to do it. So after the Maldives, like I said, I'm booking a cash ticket to Mumbai. And then from there, I've decided I'm going to go to Cape Town, South Africa. I found a flight here that goes through Ethiopia. And then from there, it goes to Johannesburg. And then from there, it goes to Cape Town. After spending some time in Cape Town, I've decided I'm going to go through Turkey, go see Istanbul. And then from Istanbul, I am going to go to Rome. From Rome, I will be going to Switzerland. And from Switzerland, I will be going back to the United States, to Chicago. There's two options actually to fly back to Chicago. One of them is on United and one of them is on Swiss Air. I happen to know that Swiss Air charges high taxes and fees, so I don't want to book that flight because even though United says the taxes and fees are the same, I know that ANA passes along the taxes for all of these airlines. And since United doesn't have high taxes, the taxes will not be high when I book with ANA. Whereas if I book Swiss Airlines on ANA, it would be expensive just like Lufthansa is expensive. So this is what my itinerary looks like tentatively. I just kind of did this for sake of example. I didn't really check every detail as I went. So you can see all these different flights and all the cool places that we're going to see. And then I just kind of run it against what it says. So do I cross the Atlantic and the Pacific? Yes. Is it going one direction? Yes. So backtracking, to go back to the itinerary here, you can see it's kind of on both sides of the screen, but from Johannesburg to Cape Town and then back to Johannesburg, they would allow that because Cape Town is not a Star Alliance hub. So they're going to know that you have to go back to Johannesburg in order to get out of Cape Town. You can't like abuse this and go back to India or something, but you can backtrack a little bit. I've never had an agent give me a problem with booking like this. I'm not exactly sure how far you can take it, but the answer is always no until you ask. The trip is more than 10 days and it does have 12 sectors or less with 4 ground transport sectors or less. So I realized I have too many stops. I wanted to see too many places. So how do I fix that? Well, basically I'm going to skip Bangkok at least this time around, and I've decided that instead of going from Hong Kong to Bangkok and then Bangkok to Singapore, I'm going to go right from Hong Kong to Singapore, and there is space available around the same time, so I'm just going to book that direct flight. I'm also going to take off the leg from Rome to Zurich. It's a short flight anyways, so you wouldn't really care about flying business class on a leg like this. And you can book it separately on United for 6,000 miles. I'm going to remove this so it doesn't come up as one of my stopovers, and then I'll book the flight separately on United or on Aeroplan and continue on my way. Now here's my updated itinerary and what it looks like. It checks all the boxes that I am aware of. So now I want to know how far it is and therefore how many miles I'm going to pay. This flight is almost 28,000 miles, so if I could get it down 3,000 miles, I would save 25,000 in business and 20,000 in economy. So if I were actually doing this, I would probably try to get it into a lower band. We'll assume for sake of example that I'm going to stay with this itinerary. If you want a preview of how much taxes and fees you're going to pay, you can go to ITA Matrix by visiting matrix.itasoftware.com. Check for all of the fees except the fare itself. Add them together in your local currency and you'll have a pretty good idea of what you're going to pay. It may fluctuate a little bit, but for the most part, this is relatively accurate. So now I'm ready to call ANA. Just be prepared that the agent will probably tell you one of the segments is not available, and you're just going to have to change and figure it out. You could search each individual segment on ANA's website. The problem is that ANA only allows you to search availability on a round-trip ticket. So you have to figure out 2 legs in order to show 1 leg, because if you search from Hong Kong to Singapore and that flight is available, but the flight from Singapore back to Hong Kong is not available, it's going to say that you can't book the ticket. So I usually just search with United or with Aeroplan, and that helps me kind of know what I can book. The agent will tell you how many miles it will cost, but they won't tell you how many taxes and fees it will be. So someone else will call you from ANA between 2 and 24 hours later in my experience, and then you pay with a credit card the taxes and fees, and then your ticket is officially booked. But until then, all your seats are held, so they're not going to go away. In summary, on this trip, you're going to visit 10 countries on 4 different continents, and it's going to cost you 170,000 miles in business or 120,000 in economy, plus taxes and fees, which I think is a really amazing deal, probably the best one that there is. You do have to pay for some individual ground sectors, but your total still comes out to less than 200,000 points. In my experience, taxes and fees are anywhere between $500 and $1,500, depending on which airlines you fly. Some good ones to look for that don't pass along too high of taxes and fees would be Ethiopian, Turkish does pass along some, but they're not exorbitant. United, Singapore Airlines, Air New Zealand all seem to have pretty good rates. Not to attack Delta too much, but you can see that if you only had Delta miles, you could fly to Japan for 495,000 points, one flight. If you had ANA miles, which you can get through American Express, you can visit 10 different countries for 170,000 points, and you can fly 27,651 miles instead of 4,803. Your points cost per business class mile flown, 103.1 points on Delta, which is 17 times more expensive. This is another reason why I put as little money as possible on airline credit cards. United does have way better rates than Delta, but in this case, they would still be almost 4 times as expensive as booking them with ANA on an around the world ticket. There's so much great value to be had from the ANA program. It's one of my favorites, and I hope it will soon become one of yours too.